Hi everyone, Stepan here. In today's video I'm going to analyze a game proposed by Brian Chavez in the comments in the last analysis video when I did Victor Petrosian 71, and he proposed that I analyze the game between Petrosian and Victor Liublinsky, which was played in the USSR Championship in 1949. So obviously Tigran Petrosian was a much stronger player, that doesn't have to be said, so perhaps his play this game was influenced by that and by the fact that he wanted to win at all costs. So his opening choice and his attacking style in this game is somewhat inconvenient for his usual play. And thank you, Brian, for proposing the game. I've never seen it before you told me about it, and I think it's a great game. And you mentioned that I should honor Petrosian's name by showing one of his wins, and that's probably true. Okay, so in the game, Tigran Petrosian opened with pawn to d4. We have knight to f6. This can still be a large number of defenses or openings. Knight f3, a very flexible move, and now e6 by Liublinsky. And here the most common moves are to go for Queen's Indian setups, so either c4 and black would play b6 and then g3. Where white is going to fianchetto his kingside bishop, or to go for the immediate kingside fianchetto with g3, c5, bishop g2. So those would be sort of anti-Nimzo Indian and Queen's Indian setups. Instead of that, Tigran Petrosian went for bishop g5, which is the Torre Attack, and it's a close relative of the London system, where the white is going to go for a simple attacking setup with pawns on e3 and c3, his light squared bishop on d3, his dark squared bishop outside of the pawn chain. In the London system it's going to be on f4, in the Torre Attack it's going to be on g5, and white is going to try to place his knight on e5, provoke a capture, and then once the f6 knight is removed, he's going to start a kingside attack. So once you see this move on the board, you know that white is in an aggressive mood. He doesn't really want to go for mainline theory. He wants to play a flexible opening, which relies much more on pattern recognition and successful attacking chances coming from your ideas than it does rely on exact move orders and opening theory. So after bishop g5, we have the move c5, which is in my opinion the most precise move, e3, which is the main move, common move. You want to create your pawn triangle. Bishop e7 is usual. Knight b to d2 is where the knight goes because the pawn is going on c3. And now, in my experience, the best way to fight the Torre is with a Queen's Indian setup, so b6 and fianchettoing your queenside bishop on b7, and I think that this diagonal is often very weak, especially because the bishop is going to go to d3, so you're not going to have that much support for the knight on f3 and the pawn on g2. So the game could have continued bishop d3, bishop b7, castles, and this I think is the best setup for black. And in theory this is what's usually played on the highest levels against the Torre Attack. Of course, Victor Liublinsky wasn't really Petrosian's level. He was a strong player, of course, but and that's not probably why he chose not to play b6. He wanted to go for a different setup, and he played the move d5, which is playable, but it sort of plays into white's hands somewhat because you don't contest the diagonal, and it's not really clear where your bishop is going after e6. So now you sort of have a French defense bishop in the queen's pawn opening. Petrosian reacted with c3, which is the most logical move, and this, as I said, the Torre Attack and the London systems are very easy to learn because you go for this pawn setup, this pawn pyramid, you develop your bishop to d3, you put your dark squared bishop outside of the pawn chain, your knights go to f3 and d2, and that's it. You finish your setup and then you start an attack. It couldn't be simpler. Knight b d7, bishop d3, and black castles. Once again, I would like to point out that a good move would have been b6, and let's say white castles, and then bishop b7, because I think these setups are very favorable for black, much more favorable than what Liublinsky played. And then you are either going to wait for black to open the center if he wishes, for white if he wishes to, which would be a mistake, or you are going to go for the move e5. Let's say you play queen to c7, stopping the immediate knight e5, and you try to push through e5, open up the position for your bishop. Instead of that, after bishop d3, Liublinsky immediately castled, and now this allows the first thematic part of white's plan. Of course, white can now castle as well. White could castle, and then black would still have time for b6, but white would be able to play knight e5. But instead of that, Petrosian played very aggressively, which is uncommon for him, with the immediate knight e5. After the immediate knight e5, it's not really clear what black is able to do now to avoid this. Keeping the knight on e5 isn't really a good idea in these positions. The engines think that black is equal here, but from an attacking perspective, this bishop is very strong. This queen is ready to jump into h5 if the knight is ever removed from f6. So this attacking pattern of knight e5, jumping into e5 and provoking a capture, is very common. And capturing is the most common move, so knight takes e5. And here white, of course, takes, d takes e5, and the fact that you have doubled pawns here doesn't mean anything. As we said, the point is to remove the main defender of the king. So after knight d7, which is the only move, white now has two options. The much more usual option is to take on e7, bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and then to play the move f4, where you can see that queen h5 is already a very dangerous threat, provoking the move g6. And after queen h5, the black queen has no way to defend. It cannot come to h4. So this would be the most common plan. And the point is that once g6 is played, which probably has to be played, either that or h6, you have now provided white with a target to attack. So if black plays h6, your pawn push is going to be g4, g5, because you have a target on h6. If black pushes g6, you're going to play h4, h5, undermining this target. And whichever pawn black moves, you have a target to exploit. If after queen h5 black plays f5, which is considered to be the best defense, then you are opening some more lines to the king. You can even open up the center and undouble your pawns with e takes f6. And in either case, it's more dangerous for black than it is for white. However, instead of that, after d takes e5, knight d7, Tigran Petrosian chose a less common move, bishop f4. And bishop f4 is the second option. I would say that it's the inferior option, but against a weaker player, if you want to go for a win at all costs, it might be wiser to keep some more pieces on the board. So I can understand Petrosian's reasoning. In this position, black played the most active move, by far, f5, trying to block the diagonal. If white doesn't react, the attack isn't really going to happen. It's going to be much harder. So white needs to be fast. There are two ways to play this position. Either ef6, which would open up the bishop's diagonal and the bishop on d3 would be active, or, what is more common, to play h4 and g4 and undermine the f5 pawn. So in this position, Tigran Petrosian played the best move, h4. Not according to the engines, but according to theory and according to humans, because this is really hard to meet. Now we have black's thematic push with c4, forcing the bishop away to c2, and you might think that this is anti-positional and basically creating a hole in your position on d4, because knight f3, knight d4 is a hole. But on the other hand, the black knight, which is on d7, which doesn't have any prospects of entering the f6 square, now has a clear plan. It can go to c5, and from there provoke white into creating weaknesses, because it's going to enter d3 or e4. In either case, white is either going to have to give up his light squared bishop or live with the fact that the knight is standing on d3. So this is a common plan in the Torre, in the London system, and in several other openings. So c4, bishop c2. And here, black made a mistake. This is the first serious mistake. At this point, according to the engines, black is still slightly better. From a human perspective, I think that white is better, but it's almost equal. And here black made a mistake. He played the move b5. b5 is a good idea, undermining the queen side, and you want to seek chances on the side of the board where you are stronger, and it's obvious that the bishop and the queen and the knight are providing support towards the queen side, so black should fight on the side of the board where he has more forces. However, this move was very imprecise in this exact position. After bishop c2, he should have played knight c5, immediately probing white's center and basically forcing white to do something. White would have to play knight f3, which is the best move, and now black would have the option of knight e4. And now this knight is very strong. If you ever decide to take it, the center is opening up, and as soon as you create another battlefield on the board, it's not really easy for white to concentrate all of his forces on the king side. So this would have been a much better plan. Instead of that, he played b5. And Petrosian played the move knight f3. Knight f3 isn't that precise, he had better options, but considering his plan, it's a good move. And if you have a plan in chess, and his plan here is, okay, I'm going to transfer all of my pieces to the king side and I'm going to checkmate, then knight f3 is a good move. And I think that having a plan and following it through, is much more important than playing engine first moves. So knight f3. Here Liublinsky played knight c5, which is a good move, and now another mistake by Petrosian, a slight imprecision. What he should have played is knight d4, getting his knight to a much stronger square before advancing the g4 pawn. Instead of that, he played g4 immediately. And g4, once again, from the perspective of his plan, is a good move. The problem is that it can be met by f takes g4, and now you have to move your knight. After you have moved your knight, now black has a chance to defend the pawn with h5, which I'm not saying is optimal, but at least it restrains white somewhat. White can now continue with f3, undermining the structure. However, after knight f3, knight c5, had Petrosian played knight d4 first, then g4, f takes g4 could have been met by queen takes g4, and white would have had a strong attack. After g4, however, Liublinsky made his second bad move, and instead of capturing, which definitely is a good move, forcing the knight either forward or backwards to d4, he played b4. And now b4 simply allows Petrosian to open up the lines and allows Petrosian to capitalize on his advantage on the king side. He plays gf5. Now, of course, the g file is open and the situation is completely different. Liublinsky has to take with the f pawn, and now at least white has a passed pawn, which is very strong and protected twice, and it's not really easy to undermine the defenders with h6, g5 when the g file is open. Now, once again, Petrosian could have played better. Knight d4 is a safer move, putting pressure on the f5 pawn, staring at the e6 square. If the knight moves, you are going to be threatening a lot of stuff. And Liublinsky should have played to this move bc3, and after bc3 knight e6, trying to get one of these defenders. And in this position, white would have been much better. This would have been more than +1 and theoretically winning for white. Instead of that, after ef5, Petrosian played in a very anti-Petrosian fashion. It's like it was Mikhail Tal playing. And he played a much more aggressive, much more dubious, much more imprecise move, knight g5. After knight g5, believe it or not, black is now much better, and this position is almost losing for white. White is attacking, but his position is loose. And now let's see what black could have done. Simply starting with bc3 would have been enough. bc3, bc3, and queen a5, putting pressure on the c3 pawn. And now it's not easy for white to react. The best move would in fact be king f1, giving up the pawn, but let's say he tries to defend queen d2. Now simply knight e4, you are forced to take because there's a double attack here, or you can take with your knight. So let's say knight takes e4, d takes e4. Now the line is, the d file is all of a sudden open. You need to move your king away, and there's pressure coming. So let's say king f1, and now bishop e6, and it's not really easy what white is doing. This position is losing for white. The fact that the g file is open is completely irrelevant now, because white's position is under so much pressure. This bishop is so bad, and the c2 bishop is so bad that white is virtually playing 4 pieces down. It's not easy to get any of his pieces into the game. Perhaps only the a1 rook can come to b1, but then you lose the a2 pawn. So this would have been completely winning for black. Instead of that, after knight g5, Liublinsky played the only move that he shouldn't have played, and the only move that just seems to be losing the position. If you remember what I was talking about, creating targets by moving your pawns, in this position he played the move g6, which now begs for h5. And now, before g6, if h5 is played, there are no targets, you're not attacking the g6 pawn. So if h5, h6, black can then play g6, close the position down. However, after g6, the immediate h5 is completely crushing. And now, white is winning. And from the engine perspective, from a theoretical perspective, from a human perspective, there's no way black can defend this, because white is going to successfully be opening up lines. Liublinsky played knight d3 check, which, I mean, it's nothing. It's a nothing move, and it just makes Petrosian's life easier. Bishop d3, c d3, h takes g6, h takes g6, queen takes d3, and now you can see that a lot of trouble is coming on this diagonal. The rook is open, the white king is all of a sudden perfectly safe, and black has no chances here. bc3, bc3, bishop g5, and now this is the crucial point of the game, where black is of course already losing. He has to choose between two evils. If he recaptures the bishop, which he didn't do in the game, then simply queen takes d5 check. Queen takes d5 check would force the king away and win the rook. And in the game, after bishop takes g5, he chose not to lose the rook. Instead, he played the move queen a5, which once again doesn't do anything. Petrosian simply played bishop f6, and now the best move would have been rook takes f6 and d takes f6, trying to survive a bit longer. Instead of that, after bishop f6, Liublinsky played rook e8, and now a simple finish and a beautiful finish, queen d4. The game went on for 3 more moves, but this move is so crushing that there's just no way to parry that. There's nothing you can do. The plan is fairly simple. The plan is he wants to play the move e6. The best move therefore for black should have been bishop e6. But then the problem is that the move queen h4 is coming, and this check doesn't really matter much, I believe, and you can escape the perpetual check. If you don't want to lose anything, then you might, after bishop e6, even try to... I think you can try to checkmate immediately. Let's see this. So with bishop e6, rook h8 check. The king only has 1 square on f7, and then rook h7 check. The king only has 1 square on f8. I'm not sure about this, and I'm offline because my internet seems not to be working, so I'm just going to try to get online and turn on the engine for this one. I'm sorry I didn't prepare this in advance, but I actually thought that bishop e6 can be met by queen h4, and I don't think this check is at all relevant. But let's see what the engine says. I'm going to try to get online now. Okay, so if I turn on the engine says bishop e6, yes, and now, yeah, rook b1, probably not to lose a piece, and if queen h4, it's still winning for white, but it's not as winning. Let's say the queen takes the rook. Yeah, the queen cannot take the rook. That much is clear. The queen has to keep checking. And can the king escape? No, you have to trade off the queens. So I guess bishop e6 would have been much more resilient, because now white would have to trade the queens or allow black to trade the queens, but it's still winning. Yeah. Rook to g1. Anyway, sorry about that. I wasn't prepared for that move. So after bishop f6, rook e8, queen d4 was played. Bishop e6 definitely was the most resilient try. You want to stop the immediate e6. Instead of that, he played king f7, which just helps with e6, because e6 is with check. And now after e6 check, rook takes e6. It doesn't matter that it's a pawn sacrifice. Petrosian found a brilliant way to lure the queen away and to finish the game. He played the move bishop d8. After bishop d8, Liublinsky resigned, which is, well, understandable. If he takes the bishop, then it's a mate into rook check. The king has to go back. If it goes back to d8 or to e8, then queen h8 is checkmate. If it goes back here, then queen g7 is checkmate, and the game is over. So, a brilliant attacking game by Tigran Petrosian. I would say that it was very imprecise, but from a human perspective completely understandable. And these are the games that I like to look at, because it's nice to see that the old masters were human. I doubt that you would be able to see that in, let's say, the US Championship this year. People are not going to be risking that much. The strength difference isn't going to be that large. And it's fun to see that Tigran Petrosian was only conservative when he was playing the strongest players. And when he was playing people that were weaker than him, then he risked a lot, because he must have known that many moves in this game were risky. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Hope you liked this Saturday's game analysis. Once again, if you have any games you want to suggest, leave them in the comments below. I have made a list with last week's suggestions, and I'm going to choose the games from the list like I chose this one. Thank you very much. Let me know what you think, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye. Thank you.